It's heartbreaking, isn't it? And yeah, in the film Moneyball, there's ultimately a happy ending, but that scene is all too close to a reality faced by many families, including some that we know and love. So if we've found security and control in our finances, in our employment, well, coronavirus has probably shocked us into realizing the insecurity of that position. And even if you're sitting comfortably this morning, I hope that as we look at this whole area of security together and later what the Bible says, we'll see that our jobs, our investments, our wealth, our pension should never be our primary means and place of security. But it's not just about work and wealth and routine, it's also about our health, isn't it? And I want this to be the second thing that we think about. For so long, we've looked to our health as a place and a means of security. Woody Allen once famously remarked, "I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens." Well, coronavirus has firmly put death on the agenda in our Western culture as we've been shocked into realizing the number of people dying each day, as that statistic was to begin with talked about and now just put in all of our faces. One of my philosophy professors from university wrote an article talking about the impact of coronavirus and death on us as a society, and I thought it was worth repeating. So let me just read a little bit of it to you. He writes, "We in the West are familiar with levels of health and longevity that are unprecedented in human history and unknown in many parts of the world now. We're complicit in a fantasy of control and domination of our bodies and all that might affect them. Our life and health is no longer a precious gift, but something to which we're entitled. And anyone who talks about health as a gift is likely to be suspected of harbouring some antiquated religious idea that makes no sense in our world, in the West. God may not be dead, but he is certainly on his deathbed, and the idea that there is a giftedness about life or the health that helps us enjoy it makes no sense to most. One of the most difficult things for human beings to feel is gratitude. Man, it might be said, is the ungrateful animal, and here is one place it shows up in the modern West." It's a shocking but good assessment of our culture. Life is not treated as a precious gift, is what he says. It's something that we're somehow entitled to. And I don't think that we as Christians have escaped that. If we're honest with ourselves this morning, if you're honest with yourself, deep down we believe that life consists of living 7 decades, maybe 8 if we get in the good food and the good diet, maybe 9 if we're fortunate. That's certainly how I live day in, day out. As I plan, as I think about my life ahead, that's where I'm heading. And that's what my attitudes and actions convey. What's more, I think we often fool ourselves into thinking that death will be somehow signposted by old age or illness with a long prognosis. And so in 2019 and the years before, we walked around shops, we played football in the park, we ate out in restaurants, we hugged and laughed and sang without worrying about our mortality. But the problem is, it's no longer possible to live with such disregard for death. Because a silent, invisible killer lies in our midst, spread by the most human of interactions with others. And all of a sudden, we're insecure, frightened even. We erect protective screens, we don masks, we refrain from embracing, we stop eating with others, all in the name of re-establishing security, retaking control over our health, and enabling other human beings to do the same. Our Western society has been forced to come face to face with our mortality, with our frailty, and the response seems to be national indignation or individualized insecurity as we wonder if the person behind us in the queue just coughed for the second time. Or maybe as you walk into the shop and you eye up that individual who's not wearing a mask. As we step into the dark recesses of abandoned shops and dark alleys, all in order to remove ourselves from the path of someone else, so that we can stay 2 meters apart. See, we want protection, we want control and security in our health. And so we put our society into lockdown, all in the hope that we might prolong our days, that we might somehow escape our mortality. And yet we realise, don't we, that we're insecure in our health as those numbers keep ticking up, as we keep seeing the death rate, as we see the number of infections climbing. We feel insecure in our health. Well, as we've started this morning, what we've sought to do is just to reflect a little bit on the current state of play when it comes to where we find our security and the way that the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown in particular has impacted the way and the places where we are able to find security. We're living in a new world where security seems like an oxymoron, where we long for it and yet don't know where to find it. And yet all of it is not some philosophical exercise. It's something that we're living in day by day. It affects our lives. And so I took some time to catch up with Andy and Naomi Clark to talk about the last few months and what it's taught them about where they find and look for security. And after we've done that, Andy Scott is going to lead us in prayer.